We've got airmail from God. With today's reading from 1 Peter, here's your host, Ted Gray.
Thank you, but I'm not worthy to be mentioned, because it is as Paul says, neither is he who plants anything, nor he who waters is anything, but God who gives the increase is everything. And Jesus, the cornerstone, is everything. We have our being from him and for him. Peter was last saying that the sorry builders rejected him. But here comes the contrast. Peter said in 1 Peter 2:9, "Ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people, that ye should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvelous light." We can see right away the principle by contrast. Two groups of humanity are being talked about. Number one, the sorry first-century religious establishment who failed to see and who failed to appreciate the chief cornerstone. And number two, the first-century Christians who had come to him. And there are reasons why group number one did not come to him. As he was saying in 2:8, "And a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense, even to them that stumble at the word, being disobedient, whereunto they were also appointed." And this is called double election, a most unpopular but true doctrine. And the reason why group number two did come to him is, as he was saying, "But ye are a chosen generation." Chosen. There's God's favorite doctrine again. It's not my favorite doctrine, but the bragging rights belong to God alone. Nobody can come to Jesus unless the Father which sent Jesus also draws him, the human being. I would not have come, and you would not have come. In a way, I don't like this doctrine at all, but I trust that God never made a mistake in his life, and that this is the only right way to save some people. But then God also says in 2:9, "We are a royal priesthood, a kingly priesthood," and every Christian is a royal priest. So, do we wear certain robes and do all these rituals we see in some church buildings? No, most of that is the traditions of men anyway. The Old Testament priesthood is fulfilled, as the law was until John. The temple curtain is rent, and all believers can enter into the Holy of Holiest presence of God, because of the application of the blood of the Lamb on their lives. A priest's function in the Old Testament was basically to be the government and to assist sinners to become right with God through the many laws, rituals, and sacrifices. And they were constantly butchering something, carving up some animals, and sprinkling blood here or there. They were also judges to judge things and people. But one basic difference between a priest and a prophet is that a priest represents men before God, and a prophet represents God before men. But all New Testament believers are now royal priests. Ever since the New Testament, which is also the new will of God, was given, he said, "You are priests." He didn't say, "Would you like to become one?" Or "Would you like to see whether you can qualify to become one?" Or "Would you like to go to school to learn how to become one?" No. You are one. That only leaves us with two choices. Number one, to be a good priest, according to the New Testament, or number two, to be a lousy priest. And the function of a good priesthood is stipulated right here in verse 9. "That ye should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvelous light." Our function is that we may proclaim. Every Christian is a proclaimer, which means to tell forth, forth-telling. Let's look at that one. One meaning of prophesying is to forth-tell. We don't need to foretell the future anymore, but we need to forth-tell the praises of God and the truth or the Christian doctrine to each other, doing the one another's within the priesthood. And we need to forth-tell the gospel to the world. And there is no separation between high priest and priesthood in the church today, because Jesus is our high priest. The only separation on earth today is between us, the royal priesthood, and the disobedient, unholy world. It is every Christian's job description to be a forth-teller of the praises of him who called us into his marvelous light. This again clashes with the traditions of men who have created a separation between Christians and the so-called full-time ministry. It's like a warmed-over Levitical priesthood for a minority minority in the church. But both can't be true. It's the tradition of men making a separation where God said, "There shall be no separation." Jesus said, "You all are brothers." The only difference or distinction in this brotherhood is that there should be older brothers, which are elders, but where God said that there should be a separation, which is between the unholy world and the holy nation, the church, us the royal priesthood, there the traditions of men have broken down the separation and brought the world and worldliness into the church. Every church that I am aware of invites unbelievers into the assembly meeting, which is totally forbidden by the New Testament. If you don't agree with this, you should make your own study on this. I'm just going to read a few. "Now I beseech you, brethren, mark them which cause division and offenses, contrary to the doctrine which you have learned, and avoid them." Romans 16:17. Is that not saying that Christians should be separated from the world? They are not living according to Paul's doctrine. And Paul further says, "What agreement has the temple of God with idols? For ye are the temple of the living God. Because God hath said, I will dwell in them, and walk in them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Wherefore come out from among them, and be ye separate, said the Lord." Out of 2 Corinthians 6. Christians should meet with Christians only, and not with the world. Also the Apostle John agrees with this when he said, "If there come any unto you, and bring not this doctrine, receive him not into your house." And house church is what it's talking about. How many times does God have to say something for it to be true? One time, but he says it in many places, that the assembly meeting is for Christians only, for the one another's, for learning, for practicing and training. But back to the first separation. We cannot have every Christian be a priesthood and also have a select small group be the priesthood. Both can't be true. It's either one or the other. It's either all Christians or only the so-called full-time ministers. And God says that you are all a royal priesthood to foretell the praises of Him. All Christians are ordained full-time ministers. Take a young Christian man, for example. He has to work for himself, for his wife, for his children, help his old parents if they need him, pay taxes, and have something to give to him who has need. In other words, he has to have something for good works or for his personal ministry. And that's the biblical full-time ministry that every Christian has. And no, he does not need to tithe, because the tithe never was from one segment of the priesthood to the other segment of the priesthood. But the tithe was given by the non-priesthood to the priesthood. And sarcastically speaking, those today who want to receive a tithe, they should ask it from the non-priesthood, which is the world, but not from Christians. That's the wrong place to get it, because all Christians are now the priesthood, which is a full-time occupation to be a priest like that. As Paul said to the church, you can all prophesy, you can all foretell the truth. And if you can't find any opportunity to foretell the truth to your own brothers and sisters in your local church, then you should look elsewhere. You might be a speaker at the mission. You could start a home church, and your first project in your home church should be to write a paper on church. Read through the whole New Testament and write down everything that God says about a church, and then do it. There's lots to do. Or you could look at hospitals, or the endless opportunities in assisted living homes, retirement homes, or nursing homes to show forth the praises of Him who has called you into His marvelous light. You could start a radio program or a website and minister, so that you may proclaim the praises of Him who called you out of darkness into His marvelous light. Even just reading the Bible to someone is a good start of that royal priestly ministry. Light and darkness, what a subject. Light and darkness are opposites, naturally, intellectually, and spiritually. Light and darkness actually want to annihilate each other when they come together, but one always wins. The light always penetrates and overcomes the darkness, but the darkness can never snuff out the light where the light is. But then spiritual darkness is even worse than just the absence of light as it is in the physical. In spiritual darkness, there's something else present. The lie is present. Spiritual darkness operates by the lie. The lie may be that we already have enough light, or that we already are in the light, or that we don't need any light, or that we even find the light within ourselves. That's spiritual inoculation against the light. The lie is present to keep the true light from penetrating. But Jesus is the light, and the doctrines of the Bible are more light. But one way to proclaim the praise of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light is just to relate how God called us personally. Paul had a testimony. He said, "And it came to pass, as I made my journey, and was come nigh unto Damascus, about noon, suddenly there shone from heaven a great light round about me, and I fell unto the ground, and heard a voice saying unto me, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? And I answered, Who art thou, Lord? And he said unto me, I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom thou persecutest. And they that were with me saw indeed the light, and were afraid, but they heard not the voice of him that spake to me. And I said, What shall I do, Lord? And the Lord said unto me, Arise, and go into Damascus, and there it shall be told thee of all things that are appointed for thee to do. And when I could not see, for the glory of that light, being led of the hand by them that were with me, I came into Damascus, and one Ananias, a devout man according to the law, having a good report of all the Jews which dwelt there, came to me and stood and said unto me, Brother Saul, receive thy sight. And the same hour I looked up upon him, and he said, The Lord of our fathers hath chosen thee, that thou shouldest know his will, and see that just one, and should hear the voice of his mouth. For thou shalt be witness unto all men of what thou hast seen and heard. And now why tarriest thou? Arise and be baptized, and wash away thy sins, calling on the name of the Lord. Out of Acts 22. Paul related how God called him, and we should do the same thing. Now the way God called me goes something like this. I was young, healthy, happily married, and living near the Venice beach. I had a good job, money in the bank, a 7-foot rowboat, flippers, a spear gun, and a mandolin. I had a life dedicated to fishing and to the Venice beach. So I thought that I had a life, but on the inside I was worried. This verse kept ringing in my mind, What shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? I knew I was losing my soul to sin, to judgment, and to hell. So when Billy Graham came to town, I could no longer resist his calling. I was so convicted that I went to the first meeting and went forward to get saved right then, and Gertie too. But how did you get called? I would like to hear yours. A personal testimony is also more valid than a theory. How can anybody say, no, this didn't happen to you? You were there, you should know. You Christians are the God-ordained priests to tell someone how God was good by calling you. But theologically speaking, what was unthinkable during the law is now fundamental to the church. Proselytes or converts now become priests. The priesthood and its ministry is now for every member of his family, and they are not to be special masters, rabbis, lords, fathers, and benefactors. There is no sanctuary or temple made with hands where God dwells. That's Old Testament. God now dwells in his people, in his priesthood, and there's no legitimate, qualified, professional minority of ministers on whose professional service God's family would depend on. That's what the Bible clearly teaches. I'm reading one. By him therefore let us offer the sacrifices of praise to God continuously. That is the fruit of our lips, giving thanks to his name. But to do good and to communicate, forget not, for with such sacrifices God is well pleased. Again, it's for all of us, out of Hebrews 13. This is the faith which was once for all delivered to the saints, and we are told to earnestly contend for it, because it's so very elusive. Something very unfortunate happened in the early church. They had a better idea, better than even God, so they thought. It resulted in taking the Bible away from people altogether. They objected to every plowsman having the Word of God, and the church never recovered from this. We as a modern Protestant church still don't practice the priesthood of all believers, not even of most believers. But it says we are to love one another in deed and in truth, which is in Christian doctrine. This is tape number 312, and you can download it at www.airmailfromgod.org. Until next time, enjoy your priesthood, and it is possible only because Christ arose.